This is the Rainier Chaplain's podcast, hosted by the state chaplain, Colonel Don Brewer. In every uniform, there is a unique and encouraging story of heroism that is often yet to be told. Listen weekly as we have raw, honest conversations with members throughout our formation about topics that impact the lives of our service members and their families.
I'm here with Major General Brett Daugherty, the Adjutant General for the state of Washington.
Indeed.
And we're going to talk about resiliency. Now, over the last 4 years, I've had all kinds of conversations, both with individuals and groups of people.
Sure.
That we end up talking about the change that's happening in our culture. And what's funny about this is, since we're the old guys now that are in leadership,
Yep.
it's that same conversation that just continues to happen every generation, where we're looking at the younger generation and we're trying to figure out kind of what makes them tick, what helps them, what motivates them, and especially from the Army perspective, what gives them purpose and meaning. And I think you're the same as me in the sense that we want to know what keeps them healthy, and especially when we're talking about mental health.
Right.
We're talking about the problem that we've had in the military with suicide.
Yeah.
It seems like the younger generation is having a more difficult time as it pertains to mental health related issues and suicide.
Yeah.
And it was hard before the COVID-19 pandemic happened. And now all of a sudden we get this COVID-19 pandemic.
Oh, sure.
And I'm reading all kinds of articles that are talking about the effects of isolation and quarantine and what effect that's going to have on mental health related issues. So I just want to get your perspective on how this is related to resiliency. This word that I know we're familiar with because the Army uses it.
Sure.
The military uses it. But if you ask anybody on the street, everybody kind of has a different definition to it, which is okay. I want to know, how would you define resiliency, or what does being resilient look like?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. I've given a lot of thought to this as you and I have talked about it over the course of many years now. And in my mind, it gets all distorted, and the Army comes up with a new videotape about it, and there's all sorts of lesson plans about it, and it just gets kind of lost in the smoke. But in my mind, resiliency is just being able to deal with adversity. And adversity can take all sorts of different forms and shapes. We spend a lot of time worrying about resiliency of our state to deal with, unfortunately, not a pandemic. We didn't give a tremendous amount of thought to that here in our department, more Department of Health. But the earthquake is what we've really spent a lot of our time, trying to build resiliency in our people to withstand a major shock to the whole system in terms of an earthquake. So that's kind of at the higher level. We have to have our society ready to be resilient to a big disaster. But at the personal level, individuals have to be able to deal with adversity in their lives. And I think we're going through some of that right now with the pandemic. I mean, it's hard. We were just talking on a staff call today about the fact that even though people haven't been out, doing physically hard labor for the last 120 days, we're kind of tired. We've been doing this response, and it's the isolation. Everything is virtual. You can't see this particular enemy, and yet it's out there and it can kill you. And that creates stress. And so that's adversity. We have to be able to deal with that. And you mentioned suicides. I mean, unfortunately, my experience in all these suicide cases over the years has been, I think probably in 90% of them, there is some relationship that is super important to the individual who takes their life, and that relationship goes wrong, and they just can't seem to deal with that adversity. And so I'm always, I've got a lot more gray hair than I used to have, thinking about those things. How do we get people to understand that sometimes relationships fail, and that it's not the end of the world, that life can go on if you're a resilient person? And so that's, kind of my definition, I guess. It's just dealing with hard times and adversity, and nobody's life is a utopia. We're going to have difficult times and challenges, and we just have to be able to adapt and overcome. So those are my thoughts on it. It's kind of a basic layman discussion about hard times.
Yeah, that's good. I don't know what it is about life. It seems like the more comfortable my life gets, when hard times do come, it's like a shock. It's a surprise. So it's almost harder to get through.
Right.
What maybe I wouldn't have considered that hard before. So it's interesting that the more, and I talk about that all the time, as far as the more comfortable our lives get, it seems like it's hard to be resilient when we're faced with adversity.
I think you're spot on, and I think the opposite is true. I spent a lot of time talking with my uncles who fought World War II and went through the Great Depression before that. And some of the stories that they would relay to me, it was the fact that they were already tough. They were already hardened by the Great Depression and had been through such enormous adversity that they were then able just to continue and deal with the adversity that they had to deal with during World War II. And so I think that they were prepped they were trained by previous adversity to deal with an even greater level of adversity. And I think you could make the case that we're just the opposite of that. Everything in our lives has been made easier for us. We don't even have to turn on our own lights anymore. It's that kind of convenience and ease in our modern world. And so we're not nearly as tough or as resilient as that generation was, because we have not had to be that tough before. And so that really kind of gets to the idea of, well, how do you become resilient? And I think that you have to go through some tough times. You have to place yourself in challenging situations that train you to fail and get back up and keep going with the mission. And so you have to look for opportunities to do that. You have to challenge yourself. You have to put yourself into frightening situations. Not overtly dangerous. I don't want anybody to do anything stupid out there, but you have to push your envelope a little bit and do things where you're uncomfortable and be able to handle it. And if you fail, you don't give up. You learn from that, and you come back and try and do better the next time. But I think there has to be some muscle memory about how to deal with adversity and hard times. And you have to put yourself out there. If you just go home and turn on the hunting show and relax and have a beer all the time, and that's as adverse as it gets for you, then when you do get hit with adversity, you're not ready for it.
Yeah. No, I think that's great, because there's all kinds of good helps online that talk about how to practice resiliency. And that's what I was going to ask you is, hey, how can you get it? How can you, and can you practice it? Now you just gave this, the great concept that, hey, in order to be resilient, you have to go through hard stuff.
Right.
You can prepare for it. You can try to do different techniques, which can be helpful. But the only thing the main thing that has made me resilient is going through hard times. And then you're on the back end of it.
Yeah.
And you have a different level of, I don't know, what would you call it? Is it confidence? Is it, I don't know what word you would give to that when you're on the backside, looking through what you just went through and say, okay, hey, yeah, I made it.
Yeah, you do have a certain level of confidence, and you know that if you handled some other situation, you can probably handle this situation as well. There's one other thing that I was thinking of, is to not just focus on themselves so much, but focus on others and help other people who are going through adversity. So I learned when I was teaching that I had students that were really going through a tough time in their lives. Some of them were homeless, some of them had suffered abuse at home. You couldn't really get them focused on wanting to learn about American history if they were hungry and had stress at their homes. And I found that by getting to know those students and helping them, I gained an appreciation for their adversity that they were working through. Mm-hmm. And I found, during the course of that period of time, my grandmother passed away, and I was really, really close with her, and that was a terrible blow to me to lose her, and it was kind of unexpected, even though she was elderly. But I found that by focusing on helping other people who were going through things much worse than what I was going through, it helped me deal with my grandmother's passing, because I said, you know, this hurts me, but it's not nearly as bad as what's happening to this particular family. And if they can deal with that, certainly I can deal with the passing of my grandmother. And so the lesson that I kind of generalized out of that was that you don't always just have to focus on you and your resiliency. If you're busy trying to take care of some other people, you gain an appreciation for what difficult situations they're going through, and you kind of can draw the lesson that if they can handle that, I can handle this. Yeah. And so that's just another strategy, I think, for trying to deal with adversity.
Well, I know, working with people that struggle with depression, it's so easy to get focused if you have that kind of a flavor, with in struggling with things. It's easy to get focused on yourself and your issues, and your situation. So,
exactly.
By you saying that, talking about being able to help others, I know for me that gets me out of my own cloud or my own world, and gets the focus off of me and what I'm concentrating on as my struggles.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I just think it's not all about me, it's not all about you. It's about us. And if we focus on playing an active role in trying to help other people, I just think there's a ton of goodness that comes from that. And I think it builds resiliency. And then finally, you and I have talked about this before. There are a lot of young people today that are missing the boat on a spiritual connection. And I've been not a super religious guy, but a person of faith for my whole life. And my faith really helps me when I'm dealing with adversity. And I couldn't probably quote scripture about it or anything. I'll leave that to you. But I was always taught from my grandparents and my parents that God never gives us so much that we can't handle it. Mm-hmm. And I have hung on to that throughout my entire life. And I just believe that when we do face adversity, I try to view that not as some overwhelming catastrophe, but I try to view it as a challenge that I have to overcome. And I know that God is there with me, helping me overcome whatever difficulties that I'm facing. And that has been an enormous amount of strength to me, just to hang on to that belief that God is never going to give me more than I can handle. And I believe that. And I think that's seen me through some pretty challenging times over the course of my life. So I offer that up too as another tool in the kit bag of dealing. But I think, I used to see this in my students as people have become kind of separated from our major institutions, and religion being one of those. They're cast adrift. They don't have an anchor to hang on to when times get bad. And I certainly wouldn't tell people what faith to have, but try to have some faith, and expose yourself to a wide variety of faiths, and find one that works for you, and try it out if you haven't committed to a faith. It's helped me, and I think it's a good way to go.
Well, the faith, when you say faith, that I think of this idea of worldview, that it provides, you said, an anchor. It provides a foundation, or it can provide a foundation, especially for hard times.
Right.
So that I have a belief system or an understanding of, hey, how does death fit into my life, or how does struggle fit into my life? And when you don't have that, you can float adrift for a long time in despair and uncertainty and fear, because you don't have an anchor to say, okay, wait a minute, I don't understand what's going on here, but I can at least say, hey, I believe it fits into life somehow.
Yes.
And I can still have hope in the midst of this.
That's correct. Yeah. Hope. That's absolutely paramount. We can be so focused on the adversity that we're going through and the hard times that we're going through that we can lose hope sometimes. But I've been saying this a lot throughout the course of this pandemic. This too shall pass. We will get through this, and we will get back to a normal way of life here. And we just have to have faith in that. But hard times will not be with us forever. You get faced with hard times, you overcome them, and then life gets on to a better plane. And so that's all about hope and realizing that hope as you come out of a challenging situation. One final tool that I've always found very helpful in dealing with adverse situations is to deal with it like we deal with everything else around here, and that is as a team. And I've always made it a common practice to surround myself with the absolute best team that I can find. And so even when I'm feeling down or I'm having periods of doubt of what's going on and my ability to deal with it, I know that I've got a couple dozen or a couple hundred other great people right there with me who are going to help me figure out whatever challenge that we're facing. And so I take advantage of that. And so even if I'm maybe lacking a little confidence in my own ability in a particular day, I'm never lacking in the confidence of the collective brain power that is my team. And so I just offer that up to everybody as well. Have a good team. Have a good team at home, have a good team at work, have a good team in the Guard, and that support network. You can't lose faith in all those good people. You just can't. You know that they're good people and they're going to help you with whatever issue you're facing. And so that's another thing to have in your kit bag, is a really good team or several good teams, and approach it from that angle.
If you would like what you listen to, follow the Rainier Chaplains on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter for more content produced throughout the Chaplain Corps of the Washington National Guard.